at the international desk, the US president says he wants to deport immigrants without a court hearing. Turkey's president wins re-election and sweeping new powers, plus questions about Mo Salah's future with the Egyptian national football team. All that news coming up right here. Welcome, I'm Lynda Kinkade. Well, the impact of US President Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy is still very raw. More than 2,000 undocumented children have yet to be reunited with their families. Renewed protests are set to get underway next hour at a detention center in Texas. But Mr. Trump is responding to the criticism by ratcheting up his rhetoric and trying to shift the debate. Abby Phillip has more on where things stand.
Unite the families now!
Protests intensifying as the Trump administration struggles to reunite the thousands of children still separated from their parents. Democratic lawmakers touring detention centers at the border, blasting the conditions they saw inside.
It's a disturbing picture. There are children by themselves. I saw a 6-month-old baby. They're all on concrete floors in cages. There's just no other way to describe it.
But despite the public outcry, President Trump ramping up his hardline immigration rhetoric, suggesting that those who crossed into the United States illegally should be sent back immediately without due process or an appearance before a judge. The New York Times reports that President Trump complained to aides about why he could not just create an overarching executive order to solve the problem. Those aides explained to him that immigration overhaul is beyond his powers.
The problem with his executive order is it's in direct contradiction to the standing order and ruling from the judge in 2015. My guess, that stroke of a pen does not survive 3 weeks before this court overrules it.
The president blaming Democrats for failing to pass immigration reform legislation last week and calling his party to focus on immigration in the fall, not now.
And I like the issue for election, too. Our issue is strong borders, no crime. Their issue is open borders. Let MS-13 all over our country.
President Trump's comments leaving Republicans confused on how to move forward.
I did talk to the White House yesterday. They say the president's still 100% behind us.
I don't know how in the world we're going to fix this in the short term. It's really a big mess.
This as the Department of Homeland Security and Health and Human Services reveal their plan to reunite immigrant families separated at the border. Children will remain in custody of Health and Human Services based on the results of their parents' immigration proceedings. If the parent is released, they can apply to be the child's sponsor, a process that could take weeks. If the parent is deported, the child will be reunited before they leave the country. But it's still unclear who will link the parents with their children. Backlash over the crisis hitting home as Press Secretary Sarah Sanders was kicked out of a Virginia restaurant Friday night. Sanders firing back on Twitter. Her actions say far more about her than about me. I always do my best to treat people, including those I disagree with, respectfully and will continue to do so. The owner of the Red Hen saying, I explained that the restaurant has certain standards that I feel it has to uphold, such as honesty and compassion and cooperation. I said I'd like to ask you to leave.
Well, Abby Phillip reporting there, and the president has just weighed in on that restaurant which refused to serve his press secretary. He tweeted in defense of Sarah Sanders and accused the restaurant of being dirty. Well, let's get back to the immigration debate and the crisis at the border. President Trump's policies may be causing some migrants to weigh their plans about crossing into the United States. Leyla Santiago is in Tijuana, Mexico at the border. And Leyla, just give us a sense of the feeling now. You've been speaking to migrants who no doubt have heard some of this audio and seen some of the pictures coming out of the US of these children that have been detained and separated at the border. Have any of them changed their mind about coming to the US?
You know, sort of the overwhelming emotion that I get when from these families when I talk to them is just confusion. I mean, I talked to one woman, a mother that had her son with her, her 7-year-old son. She's from Honduras, and she was saying that the moment she saw those images, the moment she heard the cries from the audio, that's when she said, I can't move forward. I'm not going to try to seek asylum because I can't be separated from my child. But she also said she couldn't go back to Honduras because going back would could mean death for her. Now, when she heard that President Trump had signed an executive order to change family separation, she got back in line. She got back in line at the port of entry, the legal way to seek asylum at the United States of America. And now she's waiting to see what will happen next. That's just one mother of many in line. The migrants here sort of have this unofficial list that they themselves have created, they themselves manage. And on that list right now, here in Tijuana, there are more than 900 migrants waiting to seek asylum at the United States of America.
That's quite incredible. And just in terms of the policy that is unfolding here in the U.S., the Republican Party clearly trying to nut out some sort of legislation on immigration. Is that being closely watched at all by the migrants? Are they taking that into consideration?
Again, it's confusion. I actually, a conversation I had that really stuck with me. I spoke to a 16-year-old girl traveling by herself, said that when she hugged her mother goodbye in Guatemala, her mother said, "I'm so sorry I have to do this, but this is for your safety." The gangs told her, you have two options, either sell drugs or prostitution. And when I talked to that 16-year-old girl traveling through Mexico by herself, she was confused. She didn't understand what is an executive order, what is legislation in terms of immigration. She had no idea what to expect when she goes and speaks to an immigration official in the United States to say, I want to seek asylum. Many here are monitoring the news, but they're very confused as to what is next.
All right, so Leyla Santiago in Tijuana, Mexico. Good to have you with us on the ground there. Thank you. I want to bring in David Drucker now. Joining me from New York is a CNN political analyst and senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Good to have you with us, David. I want to first ask you about this language we're hearing from the U.S. president, using words like infestation, invasion, warning America that we'll see an invasion of MS-13 gang members when we're seeing these pictures of mothers and children coming across the U.S. border. Who is he playing to, and is it working?
Well, he's playing to the American public and especially the base of his political party, but I think to the public broadly by trying to paint his actions on immigration and his policies as stopping criminals from entering the U.S. Look, as we just saw from this report, there are a lot of people from Honduras fleeing gangs, fleeing, possible death, if not worse, and they're requesting asylum at the entry there in Mexico. But if you talk about immigration, legal and illegal, in these terms, the president's policies are not going to be very sympathetic. If you try and paint this as his effort to stop an invasion of criminals who are going to do harm to the people in the United States, then you're going to find more support. And I think that's what the president has always tried to do. I don't think the numbers necessarily back him up, but I think that there is a lot of sympathy for this idea that some people who cross illegally are not good people, and that is what he plays to.
And it seems to be effective messaging for certain elements of his own party. Looking at some recent opinion polls we've got just last week from Gallup, showing that his all-time approval rating is up to 45%. That is an all-time high. And amongst Republicans, it's at 90%, which I'm sure, like the rest of the world, might be quite surprised at, given the criticism we've seen of this immigration policy.
So I think we need to let a little bit of time to pass and let the dust settle on the situation at the border, how these images and the audio are playing, because it often takes the public a week or two to digest events and then for us to find out accurately how they feel. But I do think it's important to understand that the president is not a pariah among Republicans. Most of them are pretty happy with the policies that he's implemented. There's definitely a significant group of Republicans that wish he was a little bit more civil, that wish he would tweet less. and they would like to see a softer approach from him on some issues. But broadly, they're supportive of him. And I also think it's important to understand that while I think the president got himself into hot water politically with the zero-tolerance family separations policy, and that's why you saw at least a sort of tacit attempt to backtrack from that, if you take out the family separations issue and just talk about should the border be secured and should illegal immigration be halted, those issues are going to enjoy a broad amount of support, not just from Republicans, but I think from a lot of independent voters who are swing voters. And that's where I think there's some confusion because, you know, on the left, there's been a melding of this idea that immigrants are immigrants, whether they're legal or illegal. And I think that if the issue is all immigration should be treated the same versus the border should be secured, the president is going to have the political high ground. If we talk about how illegal immigrants should be treated, whether or not most of the people coming to the United States are good people that are going to contribute versus they're criminals, I think that's where the president is not necessarily going to win the argument. But it's important to understand the political dynamic here when we're trying to figure out exactly what is going to happen in Congress and exactly how far the administration is going to go.
All right, David Drucker, we'll see how this plays out, but good to get your analysis. Thanks so much.
Thank you.